Hello YouTubers, my name is Attila Mate from Blue Sky Photography, and today I would like to talk to you about some information in regards prices and the differences between the Sony system and the Olympus system. Now I got a few comments in my videos, and especially the Sony users, they are sometimes very angry and they are very rude, I would say, and they call me many names, but when I say that Sony is an expensive system and it lacks in a lot of area, even now in 2017 December, Sony it's not comparable with a mature system like Olympus. Now in this video we will talk about Olympus. Well, not Olympus, Micro Four Thirds, Panasonic or Olympus. And I would like to do this video just to finish this once and for all, this conversation, and just to see that price wise, and not only price wise, it's in other areas as well. Sony is yet not a mature system. I don't say that it will not be, sorry. I don't say that it will be always a disadvantage on Sony side, no, but at this moment even it is disadvantage, and I want to talk about this a little bit. So gear price, let's see how much it costs, if we buy a Sony system or if we buy a Micro Four Thirds system. Now until not too long ago, a Micro Four Thirds system had a disadvantage because they didn't really have cameras with dual SD card slots, strong magnesium alloy bodies, and battery grips and all these kind of things, which one a pro wedding photographer, the example, would need. Because dual SD card slot, in my opinion, is very important when you are a wedding photographer. If you are wildlife or whatever, it's up to you. But like a wedding photographer, when you are on a wedding, that's a unique event that cannot be redone, that cannot be repeated. So you must be sure that your photos are safe. Now, not too long ago, Panasonic and Olympus released a good few cameras with dual SD card slot, and now they have that. They have the battery grip options, they have the dual SD card slot, they have the lightning fast autofocus, everything what you need for a pro job. The only advantages on the Sony side or DSLR side, I would say, or let's not say like Sony mirrorless or DSLR, let's say like bigger sensor side. The only advantage is the dynamic range. That is bigger on the bigger sensors, obviously. But let's see now about the prices, and let's see about the Olympus and Panasonic varieties. So a pro wedding and portrait photographer would need these lenses. I'm talking about wedding and portrait photographer because I am a wedding and portrait photographer, and I would say with these lenses you could do also not only wedding and portrait, also landscape photography. You could do again some street photography, or you could do journalism, or you could do many varieties you could do with these lenses and these cameras I'm talking about here. So a wedding and portrait photographer would need a wide lens, which is a 16mm, I would say. Wide is considered roughly from 14mm until 24. Now obviously the 24mm side is not really wide, but it's better than nothing, So if you don't have anything else, 24 is still considered kind of wide end, So wide millimeter, let's say a 16mm. Zooms, you would need a 24 to 70, a 70 to 200, and you would need portrait primes, 85mm and 135mm. Now, with these lenses, you could do any wedding and any portrait job. No, that's the true and period. That's it. You could do with these lenses. Now, let's calculate how much would it cost in Sony and how much would it cost in Olympus. So first of all, let's say the Sony, the wide angle option, 16mm. Now, Sony E-mount has the 16mm Sigma f1.4 contemporary, which is $450. Great job, Sigma. That's a great lens, obviously. That's not a problem. Now, On the Sony side, you have the 16 to 35 f2.8 G Master zoom, which is $2,200. That's a little bit painful. 2,200. Okay. Or you have the Sony 12 to 24 millimeter f4 FE lens, which is $1,700. Now, obviously, these lenses are full frame. They are FE lenses. I'm talking about the 16 to 35 f2.8 G Master, the 12 to 24 millimeter f4 FE, and the Sony Zeiss 16 to 35 f4 lens, which is $1,250. These three lenses are full frame lenses. And maybe some people will say, yeah, but they are full frame lenses. It's not my fault that Sony doesn't do any lens for, well, not any lens, but comparable zoom lenses they don't do for the APS-C size. That's not my fault. So if you want to buy for the A6500, if you want to buy an f2.8 zoom, you have to buy only the G Master because you don't have any other zoom. That's the truth. So this is the wide angle option on the Sony side. Let's see it on the Olympus side. The Olympus side, you have the Olympus 7 to 14 millimeter, which is comparable 14 to 28 millimeter full frame field of view, you know. And that would be, sorry, f2.8 Pro lens. That would be $1,100. Or the Panasonic Leica 8 to 18 millimeter f2.8 to 4 variable, which is f2.8 on the wide end and f4 on the kind of the telephoto end, and that is $1,100. The Panasonic 7 to 14 millimeter f4 lens is $800. The Olympus 8 millimeter f1.8 prime is $800. The 8 millimeter would be roughly a 16 millimeter on the full frame and field of view. So oh, and there's the Olympus 17 millimeter f1.2, which is the 17 millimeter would be 34 millimeter in full frame field of view, and that is $1,200. Now, if you look carefully on this, you can see that on the Sony side, you see the 16 millimeter is the Sigma prime, and other than that, you have the zooms. Now the zooms have the 12 to 14 millimeter f4 lens, which is the widest lens. The 12 millimeter, if you have an APS-C size camera, the 12 millimeter will be 18 millimeter on the full frame field of view, because the APS-C crop factor is 1.5. The Micro Four Thirds crop factor is 2. So any lens which you put, any Sony lens or Sigma or whatever you put on the Sony camera, you have to multiply with 1.5. And any lens I'm talking about here on the Olympus or Panasonic, you have to multiply with 2, the focal length, because of the crop factor. So as you can see over here, the Sony side, you can't really have 16 millimeter unless you get a unless you get a full frame camera, because the widest is 18 millimeter. That's the 12 to 24 millimeter f4 lens, which is $1,700. Now, the Olympus, the wide, if we talk about f4, you can get the Panasonic 7 to 14, which is 14 to 28 millimeter. That's pretty wide. That's much wider than 18 millimeter. 14 to 18 millimeter, it's a big difference. So, and that is $800. Now that's a big difference. 800 versus 1,700. And the 1,700 is only 80 millimeter. The 800 is 40 millimeter. It's a big difference. Now anyway, let's go a little bit further. And let's now see the popular zoom ranges like the 24 to 70 or the 70 to 200. So first let's see the 24 to 70 f2.8, because that is really a popular zoom range. And not only wedding photographers will use that, it's good for general photography, you know, and it's a very popular zoom range. So first the 24 to 70, Sony side. Sony 24 to 70 f2.8 G Master, $2,200. Or Sony FE 24 to 70 f4 Zeiss lens, $1,100. Now, we don't have to forget that the 24-70 f4 lens, that wasn't really the best image quality wise. It was I wouldn't buy that lens, honestly. I think that, in my opinion, the G Master is better. Or if you have a crop sensor camera, you have the 16-70 Sony Zeiss lens and f4 lens, and that is $900, and that is much better. The 16-70, that's only for crop sensors. That's not for full frame, and that is much better image quality than the 24-70 FE lens, f4. Don't forget that. So let's see now the Olympus possibilities. On the Olympus side, obviously you have Panasonic and Olympus. Panasonic Lumix G12-35 f2.8. That's the first version, because Panasonic has two versions from this lens, and that is $700. The second is Panasonic 12-35 f2.8 version 2 is $900, so $200 expensiver. And there's the Olympus 12-40 f2.8 Pro, that is $800. Now, if you ask me which one I would buy, Olympus or Panasonic, I would say, which camera do you own? If you own Panasonic cameras, buy the Panasonic. If you own Olympus cameras, buy the Olympus. In my opinion, they are both great image quality. You know, there is no difference. The Olympus is a little bit longer zoom range; it's until 80 mm. But on the other side, you know, it's a little bit expensive, $100. Well, it's $100 cheaper as well than the second side of Panasonic, the second version. So it's up to you. But I would go on Olympus. That's what I think. Anyway, so if you see over here with Sony, the f2.8, the only option is the G Master, which is $2,200. If you want f2.8. Other than that, you have two versions of f4 lenses, which is one the full frame, which one I would just strike out. I don't like that lens. And you can check many videos on YouTube and you will see that I'm right. That lens is not sharp enough. There's something is wrong with that lens. And the second is the Sony Zeiss 16-70, which is a good lens for APS-C, and that is $900. So again, we are talking about $900 versus $800. Again, Olympus is cheaper with $100. Okay, on this side, the difference is not as big as before, because if we take the price difference, what it was before, you know, that was horrible big. I mean, now it's not so big. Now it's only $100, so that's okay. Now let's see the 70-200 zoom range. If we go to 70-200, Sony again first, you have the 70-200 f2.8 G Master, which is $2,600, and you don't have any other option in f2.8. Only option you have in Sony after it is the f4. You don't have f2.8. Now f4, you have the 70-200 FE, which is again a full frame lens. That is $1,400, and that's it. Either you buy f4, either you buy f2.8. You have to buy Sony. You don't have any other options. Now go to Olympus. Panasonic has the Panasonic G35-100 f2.8 version 2, which is $1,000, $998, $1,000, and the version 1 of the 35-100 f2.8, which is $700. And Olympus has the 40-150 f2.8 Pro, which is $1,300. Now the 40-150, like I said at the beginning, you have to multiply by 2 always, and that would be 80-300. And that's a big difference. Now imagine you have a 300mm f2.8 lens on your camera. Obviously, when I speak f2.8, I don't say the depth of field wise. Don't confuse this. Don't get confused, because usually what people do, they think that if you have a smaller sensor, you get a 2.8 lens, it's the same. No, it's not the same. Light wise, it's the same, but not depth of field wise. The depth of field on f2.8 crop sensor, it will be obviously shallower than on an f2.8 micro four thirds sensor. So I would say the micro four thirds f2.8 would be kind of f3.6, f3.5 or 3.8 or f4, let's say f4 on an APS-C size, kind of like that. And comparing with full frame, it will be kind of like f5.6, I would say, depth of field wise, not light wise. When I say light wise, I mean if you put an f2.8 lens on a micro four thirds sensor, on an f2.8 lens on a crop sensor, the exposure settings are the same, the picture will be the same exposed, but the depth of field will be different. So on the Olympus side, I would check, sorry, not Olympus, on the micro four thirds side, I would choose, honestly, the Olympus lens. Because that's $1,300, it's true, but it is for 80 to 300 f2.8. And that's brilliant. Because although the depth of field is not as shallow, but don't forget that you have a 300mm lens, which with the zoom range, you know, you can kind of balance up, you know, the aperture. So it still will be great for portraits. And light-wise, it is very fast lens because it's a 2.8 lens. So that's what I would choose anyway. But always you have there the Panasonic option from $700 or $1,000. Now if we compare price-wise, again, if you take the Olympus lens, it's still €100 cheaper. It's an f2.8 lens and it's €100 cheaper like the f4 lens on the Sony, which is at $1,400. And don't forget that if you don't have a Sony full frame camera, if you put that lens on an APS-C size Sony camera, that f4 lens will be again kind of 5.6, so the depth of field will be the same like on the Olympus. It won't be any difference because f4 on an APS-C size sensor, it will be like f2.8 on a micro four thirds sensor. Maybe it's a bit confusing, you know, but you'll get to it if you start searching, you know, if it's confusing for you. So anyway, now let's see some prime lenses. And I'm talking about portrait primes over here, but you can get also some wide angle primes, you know, it's not an issue. It will be the same situation, but I'm talking about portrait primes, you know, which is important for a wedding or portrait photographer. Now, I would say two popular focal lengths, 85mm and 135mm. First, 85mm on the Sony side. You have the 85mm f1.8, which is $1,020. And you have the 85mm 1.4 G Master, which is $1,800. Now, that's a bit expensive. $1,800. It's a little bit expensive, I would say. Okay, Olympus. You have the 45mm f1.8 lens, which is $250. And you have the 45mm f1.2 Pro lens, which is $1,200. Now, the 45mm f1.2 lens, it will be kind of f1.8 on an APS-C size sensor and f2.8 on a full frame, I would say. But let's not forget that the Sony, if you buy the 85mm f1.8 and you put on an APS-C size, that will be again 2.8. So kind of you are on the same price with the 85mm f1.8. You are on the same depth of field on the APS-C than what you are with the 45 f1.2 Pro. And light-wise, with the 45 f1.2, you are in a better situation because you get more light. So again, here the 45 f1.2 Pro, it is expensive with $150 because the Sony 85 1.8 is only $1,020, and the Olympus is $1,200. But if you buy the f1.4, that's $1,800. So, and let's not talk about manual lenses, because you can have manual lenses in both systems. You can have in Olympus, you can have in Sony or Panasonic, you can have manual lenses, but we are not talking about manual lenses now. Anyway, I would like to mention over here two primes. And these two primes are manual, and I would like to mention because they are outstanding. They are outstanding image quality wise, and they are outstanding aperture wise as well. And these two primes would be, okay, my LED light just died, so I have to change the battery. 1 second. Okay, so I had to change the battery in my LED light because it just died on me. So sorry about that. So I was talking about the two primes, the two manual primes. And this is one of the two is the Voigtländer Nocton 42.5mm f0.5. Now this is a great prime. And I have to tell you, this is excellent for portraits because 42.5mm multiplied by 2, it's 85mm exactly. That is the focal length you need for portrait. And it's a 0.95 aperture, which is, I would say, kind of f1.4, f1.6-ish on full frame. So you don't have this option for APS-C in Sony. Unless you buy, I think there is something 0.9 lens, if I'm not wrong, from Mitakon or something like this, but that is a Chinese lens manufacturer. I wouldn't compare that with the Voigtländer. No. So that is one option, which is $800, and this is a good price for such a fast lens. And the second manual prime is a Samyang Rokinon 50mm f1.2 lens for $380. Now here the Sony users, they are a little bit in advantage because this is available for Sony as well and for Micro Four Thirds as well. But the Sony users, obviously they will have shallower depth of field because f1.2 on an APS-C, it will have shallower depth of field than f1.2 on a Micro Four Thirds. So here you have the advantage on the Sony side. Now let's see the 135mm range, and in the Sony E-mount you have only one single option, and that is the Zeiss Batis 135 f2.8, which is $1,700. Sony doesn't have one 135mm lens. Sigma Art lens there is with MC11 adapter for Sony E-mount, altogether is $1,450. The Sigma Art lens, the 135, there is in Canon mount, Nikon mount, and you can use the Canon mount and the MC11 adapter, and you have autofocus on the E-mount. I don't really like this idea, but anyway, there is an option. And Sony Alpha mount, it has the 135 f1.8 with adapter, but the lens only is $1,800. So it is a really expensive lens. It's a great lens. It's much better than the Sigma Art lens, I would say, image quality wise, but it's $1,800. So it is very expensive. Now Olympus Priority over here. Olympus has only one lens in this area, but that is great lens. And that is, I tell you, if you look at YouTube videos, you will see that it's one of the best lenses in Micro Four Thirds. And that is the 75mm f1.8, which would be 150mm f1.8. And that is enormous. That is good. 150mm field of view, f1.8, it's a great lens, I tell you. And image quality wise, it is sharp as hell. It's unbelievably sharp. So, now, guys, these are the facts. Okay, these are the prices. You can see that if you move into Sony system, there will be a price to pay. And that is, it's much more expensive than Micro Four Thirds. It is much more expensive than Fuji. It is much more expensive than Nikon, Canon. I would say Sony is the most expensive system. Well, I'm not talking about Leica system. I'm not talking about Hasselblad or these kind of things. No, I'm talking about normal systems like Fujifilm, Micro Four Thirds, Sony or whatever, you know, Nikon, Canon, these Pentax, these systems. And Sony is the most expensive. And I think that this was enough proof to see that I'm not talking bullshit. I owned Sony. I owned majority of these lenses. I know what I'm talking about. And I burned myself pretty heavy when I got into this system, and then I realized that the third-party manufacturers, they are not producing lenses as fast as they predicted. Everybody predicted that Sigma will do, Tamron will do. They do, but it's very slowly. So it's not as fast. And anyway, this is 2017, December. and still this is the situation. So I hope that this video will be helpful to somebody. I hope that it will help somebody to decide. And if you have any comment, if you want to add something to this video, even if you don't agree with me, that's not a problem. Please leave a comment down below, but please leave in a polite manner, and let's not argue and let's not call each other names. And other than that, I wish you a very, very nice day, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys.